She misses it.
Well, welcome everyone to our AAUW virtual program, all about the banned book, Fahrenheit 451, and the movies, the related movies. First, we'd like to thank AAUW Illinois for sponsoring our virtual format. And we ask that you use the chat window for questions or any technical issues. And please remember to stay muted during the program. We will be recording the program and posting it on Jane Addams' website after the program. We also encourage you, if you're new to AAUW, to consider joining the AAUW Jane Addams branch. For new members, we can offer a Shape the Future membership discount. And membership includes the branch level, the state level, and national. So you can see our Jane Addams branch dues are 10, and the state is 10, and national is 72. With the discount, a 50% discount on the national dues, the total would be $56. So if you're thinking about it, contact Kate Skegg, our treasurer for the branch, and she can help you become a member at the discounted rate. And now it's my pleasure to talk about our presenter, Gloria McMillan. She has done a couple programs before, so you may be familiar with her. She has a Master of Arts in English Literature and Comparative Literature. She also has a PhD in Rhetoric, Composition, and Teaching English. She was the collection editor on Orbiting Ray Bradbury's Mars, Biographical, Anthropological, Literary, Scientific, and Other Perspectives. And she is a research associate in the Department of English at the University of Arizona. So now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Gloria.
And I want to thank you very much. Now we have to do that high-tech thing of trying to share screen. You all know how much fun that is. But we will try to make this as painless as possible here. And a few of you, if you could just tell me when you see it.
I see your screen.
Okay. So
So you can go to slideshow view.
Okay. And it takes a while, but we're there. All right, you're all there? Okay. We will now have a brief introductory musical interlude by Bernard Herrmann, whose music was banned in Vienna, and he had to come in the 30s, and he became a great film composer and did the score for this movie version of Fahrenheit 451. Well, oops, I think I slid ahead there. We're going to divide this up in, could somebody get rid of my side people? Because when I'm trying to show slides, it's covering part of the things that I need to see. You can put them into the minimize mode instead of thumbnail. Okay, well, I hope you can.
I think you have to change your view.
Oh, it's my view. Okay, I'll try. Let's see. Yeah, it is. That's what I need to do. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Well, Ray Bradbury is such a big subject, and he had such a labyrinthine mind that I'm going to try to simplify it, and I'll give you some pointers how to find out a lot more about his labyrinth in his own brain. So we'll begin. We'll dive in here into his labyrinth, and these are pretty much the three areas that I thought would be of interest to you all. And I want to thank you, by the way, for coming, all of you. So first, we have a book that set the whole reading public on fire when it came out in the early 1950s. And Ray Bradbury had quite a struggle getting it to come out. But he did, and we're glad for that. Ray would appear anywhere. People said if they were opening a laundromat, he'd appear there to sell his books. So he would be standing there and people would ask him all of these questions, you know. First of all, were you born in Waukegan? He wouldn't deny that. And where do you get these ideas? All writers hate that, and they mutter. And will we have a nuclear war? This was on everybody's mind. It was the miasma pervading this whole talk and all of Ray Bradbury's fiction, because it was all written when it was quite an issue. The other one that everybody would come up with, if they knew, was that maybe his ancestress was a witch. So now let's dive into the deep pool of his thinking. Here we are in the Ray Bradbury labyrinth of his mind. And at the bottom, to try to make it helpful for you, you could see some of the themes that are in these stories. These are two of the main stories that became Fahrenheit 451. The Bright Phoenix story was written in 1947, but it didn't get published until 1963, long after the novel was published and just before the film came out. The Fireman is hard to find. I tried to find it online and I did not succeed, but I did find that it had come out in 1951. Bright Phoenix did not have the nuclear war theme, but it is in the Fireman. Everything comes to a climax with the nuclear war. So here is a quotation from the actual Fahrenheit 451. To see the firehouses burn across the land, destroyed as hotbeds of treason, the salamander devours his tail. Oh God. This is what was in his mind. Fire, censoring, burning of books, because it had been recent in Europe that they'd done that, but also it was going on here in the States. That's nothing, you know, just restricted to any other place. We were doing it. His other story was The Pedestrian, and Ray Bradbury hated cars. He really had an animus against cars. He had seen a terrible accident that was very gory when he was 12, and he determined at that point he'd never drive. So that made him a total nonconformist. And then in his early 20s, or even earlier, late teens, his family moved him to LA. And so trying to get around Los Angeles without driving. And he felt that. He felt he was different. And it was his first lesson, even though he was a white male, he felt very different. So here we have a quotation where the automated car is saying, business or profession? I guess you'd call me a writer. No profession, said the police car, as if talking to itself. The light held him fixed, like a museum specimen, needle thrust through his chest. And here you come with his wonderful connection to Salem witch trials. And that comes up in the libraries that they are burning. So his ancestor, Mary Perkins Bradbury, was charged with witchcraft. You can see it on the screen there in Salem, 1692. She got away with it. She made such a good case in court. Can you believe this? She talked herself right out of the charges somehow. It's probably more detailed in the biographies. But in Fahrenheit 451, the aunt of the girl who becomes the friend of the fireman is opts, she actually chooses to be burned with her library rather than have to leave her books. One of the things that Bradbury also compared was his town of Greentown and the lifestyle there with Los Angeles. In Greentown, they had a main street and people would walk and they would sit on the front porch. And he called it the highway mind. That's what they have in Los Angeles. So here he's saying, someone is saying in Fahrenheit 451, no front porches. My uncle says there used to be front porches and people sat there sometimes at night, talking when they wanted to talk, rocking, and not talking when they didn't want to talk. He felt that pain that he was out of his element in Los Angeles. So I could go on with many other threads that all get pulled into Fahrenheit 451, and his ability to draw on his own life, his own memories was huge. You can see a lot more depth in Sam Weller's The Bradbury Chronicles. Sam used to teach at Columbia University. Yeah, I guess it's called that, Columbia in Chicago. And for more in-depth on his career sources, you can see Jonathan Eller's Becoming Ray Bradbury. So now I'm going to segue over to the reception of the first text. And what we'll begin with are a couple diametrically opposed, as it turns out, reviews. And, oops, back again. Sorry about that. And actually his name is Francis McComas. I meant to fix that and it didn't get fixed. It's Francis, not Paul. You can tell by the title that he doesn't think much of Ray Bradbury. It's all that this New York Times reviewer could do not to call him the space cadets realm. And here's how he starts his review. All of his customary hypnotic eloquence, his remarkable virtuosity cannot hide the distressing fact that this is no precisely designed work of fiction, but a polemic. Mr. Bradbury seems to have developed a virulent hatred for many aspects of present-day culture, namely such monstrosities as radio, TV, most movies, amateur and professional sports, automobiles, and other similar aberrations, which he feels debase the bright simplicity of the thinking man's existence. And then he goes on about the failings of the basic premise that it's about a dystopian future, but he doesn't put it together well enough. And he concludes, this intriguing idea might serve as a foundation on which to build a worst of all possible worlds, and to a certain extent it does not seem implausible. Unfortunately, Bradbury goes little farther than his basic hypothesis. The rest of his equation is jerry-built. He makes the book's climax an all-out atomic war without even hinting at the war's causes or the rival political systems waging it. There are scenes told with heart-wrenching detail, of which Bradbury is an acknowledged master. But the characters remain spare symbols whose imagined lives are curiously inconsistent with established fact. Now we go all the way across the country to Don Guzman in Los Angeles, and he starts out very differently. In his approach to life today, and in a tenuously possible tomorrow, Ray Bradbury does not like the culture in which we exist, but he differs from other regulation sci-fi writers. He is a social critic and a storyteller such as America has not seen in many long years. Mr. Guzman especially notes the Hispanic story, and that is the one called And the Rock Cried Out. This is a tale, it's an indictment of the rich travelers in Latin America. When the white world has been destroyed, they've fled down into Mexico and going south into South America, and the colonial peoples are taking a revenge. But nothing that drastic happens in the story. He gets back to the main novella. That was a side edition. That wasn't Fahrenheit 451. In his fireman fantasy, Bradbury has taken today's fear of dangerous thoughts and words offensive to groups, organizations, minorities, and he has projected this fear into the near future when book burning is a profession. And he goes on about how this job is inherited by Montag, and it sort of does a little bit of synopsis. Then at the end of this review, this critic, Guzman, says, Mr. Bradbury has more than ideas, and that is what sets him apart from other writers who try to be original. He is fantastic and human. He never looks at anything with a jaundiced eye. He is a storyteller every minute, his own kind of storyteller. So you can see that the opinions were quite mixed. People didn't know how to take this new type of a book about book burning. And now we will actually have a clip that I think will, better than anything I could say, will show you what, now this is the 1966 film version with the music you heard in the beginning, Bernard Herrmann, Julie Christie, Oscar Werner. And we will try to find the cursor as I had it a minute ago. There. It usually takes a couple jolts to get going, so we'll see how long it takes this time. And it has always been faithfully running for me, so hopefully it will actually do the job. And here it is.
Montag. I knew it. I knew it. Of course, all this, the existence of a secret library was known in high places, but there was no way of getting at it. Only once before have I seen so many books in one place. I was just an ordinary fireman at the time. I wasn't even qualified to use the flamethrower. It's all ours, Montag. Listen to me, Montag. Once to each fireman, at least once in his career, he just itches to know what these books are all about. He just aches to know, isn't that so? Well, take my word for it, Montag. There's nothing there. The books have nothing to say. Look, these are all novels. All about people that never existed. The people that read them and makes them unhappy with their own lives, makes them want to live in other ways that can never really be. What's happening?
This house is condemned. They're said to burn the books right here with everything else.
Well, burning the house is one thing. Burning the books is another, isn't it? It's never any good burning everything together. Come on, Montag. All this philosophy. Let's get rid of it. It's even worse than the novels. Thinkers, philosophers, all of them saying exactly the same thing, only I am right. The others are all idiots. One century they tell you man's destiny is predetermined. The next they'll say that he has freedom of choice. Oh, it's just a matter of fashion, that's all, philosophy. Just like short dresses this year, long dresses next year. Look. All stories of the day. Biography, that's called. An autobiography. My life, my diary, my memoirs, my intimate memoirs. Of course, when they started out, well, it was just the urge to write. Then after the second or third book, all they wanted was to satisfy their own vanity, to stand out from the crowd, to be different, to be able to look down on all the others. Ah, Critics' Prize. Ah, this is a good one. Of course, he had the critics on his side. Lucky fellow. Just tell me this, Montag. At a guess, how many literary awards would you say were made in this country on an average each year? 5, 10, 40? No less than 1,200. Why, anybody that put pen to paper was bound to win some prize someday. Ah, Robinson Crusoe. The Negroes didn't like that because of his man, Friday. And Nietzsche. Ah, Nietzsche. The Jews didn't like Nietzsche. Now, here's a book about lung cancer. You see, all the cigarette smokers got into a panic, so for everybody's peace of mind, we burn it. Ah, now this one must be very profound. The Ethics of Aristotle. Now, anybody that read that must believe he's a cut above anybody that hadn't. See, it's no good, Montag. We've all got to be alike. The only way to be happy is for everyone to be made equal. So, we must burn the books, Montag. All the books.
So I believe that this version is the better of the two adaptations of this novel. And I hope that all of you will try to see this version. It's out there and available, I think, at Amazon somewhere. Was released in 1966 with some major stars. Oh, and I didn't correct that either. In 1968, not 2068. 2001 appeared and caused all memory of Fahrenheit 451 to fade because you know that was a huge science fiction event. This had no big effects, and Truffaut left out the nuclear wars that were in the novel, and we don't know why, he didn't say. A more recent, I believe it was 2018, HBO did a more recent version with Michael B. Jordan, and Ramin Bahrani directed it. But it was full of CGI effects, and most of the critics didn't care for it that much. It derived most of the direction. It went from the first film version, not from the novel. And I'm sure maybe it left out the nuclear war. I forget. I saw it and I don't even remember. So let's go on to the television adaptations. Well, I'm old enough, I hate to admit it, I'm historical. I remember Playhouse 90. Some of you may be chuckling if you're also historical and remember Playhouse 90. And I think I found this somewhere. I couldn't find it now, but I think I have seen that on YouTube, where in 1957, parts of Fahrenheit 451 were combined with 1984, if you can imagine it. And of course, Bradbury sued because he could use all the money that he had 4 daughters and needed all the money he could get. So he won. Now we have 3 pages of theater adaptations because Bradbury was a big supporter of live theater. And he adapted his own book into a play. And part of it was performed at the Colony Theater. And I remember hearing about that. That was the theater that he worked with in LA. It was where they would put on, I think they also put on another book that was adapted, The Man in the Ice Cream Suit. Then in 1988, it got the complete treatment by the Indiana Civic Theater, and that's an honor that goes to them. Most of these adaptations follow the film. I guess Ray Bradbury was influenced by the film and he left the nuclear war out. There are other things that are closer to the film. Then it moved over to the UK and it got done a few times on the stage in the UK right before, a few years before Bradbury actually died, was popular over there. And it was also done off Broadway in New York City, and a one-man show adaptation of Fahrenheit 451. And so it has various incarnations, and they can do various things with it. If you leave the nuclear war in, it's one kind of a experience, and if you take it out, other. Then there were radio dramas done from it. Oops, I hit some button that I shouldn't have there. And BBC has a number of these that are on YouTube. So you could actually compare versions with different fairly well-known actors in the BBC radio dramas. So now I'm moving into the third aspect of Ray Bradbury. We know that he's been translated, and I should have looked it up. It's something like 45 languages. And he is read all around the world. But is he a museum piece? We have to think, this is a very old novel. Is it relevant to us? And what is the relevance? So I thought I'd explore some of the different kinds. There's more than one kind of censorship. And there's one kind in particular that Bradbury covers, but the minor key is that there's another kind that's actually more effective than the kind that he talks about. So sometimes more effective. So here is the first half of the school year, 2022-23. And you can see which states are leading the charge on banning. And maybe you're coming in from all different places. So maybe your state may be a gray state, or it may be a more colorful state, depending on where you're from. But maybe you haven't looked this up, but this is where you stand in the great race to ban books. this data comes from Penn, you know, the writers group. I'll leave that on the screen just a little while longer if you're trying to find your own state. Okay, well, the subject matter also from Penn gives you an idea of what subjects are being targeted for book banning. And I thought themes of grief and death may include nuclear war anxiety. So I sort of find maybe that's hidden in that. I don't know if there are even any books out, because it seems like it's just not being talked about. We're very close, you know, to the edge again, but we're not talking about it. And we're protecting everyone. We're protecting ourselves from discussing it. And that was part of the reason that Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451, because it was the scenario in the novel was that people didn't know there was an impending nuclear holocaust coming because they had a million things to be busy with, and they didn't realize that that was being hidden from them. Okay, so actually here are some of the titles of the, I looked up every single one of these, and some of them I knew. And it was interesting that what a lot of them are gender titles, and there are a couple race books about being a minority race, a BIPOC person, or a BIPOC person with being gay. And some of them are even classics. The Bluest Eye has been out. I should have looked it up, but it's been out for decades. Up above, you'll see that I did find out, because I was very curious, if books prepare kids to live in the world around them, then what's missing here? Well, there's nothing being banned because it's simply not being talked about, the risk of nuclear war. And how do you talk about nuclear war to children? And that made me think, and I had to scramble and get this done today, who wrote about nuclear war for at least the young adult crowd? And these were the two books that were most keyed into that in the 1950s. One came out, The Starman's Son came out in 1952 by Andre Norton, who's a major science fiction writer. It seems like science fiction will talk about things nobody else is willing to talk about. And they're always saying that's a children's genre. Isn't that ironic? And it's the one that will tackle topics that nobody else will take on. So here we have, and actually on gender issues and race, they've done a lot earlier than the rest of literature. In fact, Bradbury's one story that he got into the New Yorker, and you can read that online, was called I See You Never. And it was about an immigration roundup in a boarding house in Los Angeles that he lived in before he was married, and he saw a man get rounded up. And that is his one, Ray Bradbury's one story that made it in. And it was 1940, I should have looked it up, 47 or 49, very early. And we were in a very congratulatory mood in this country. We didn't want to hear anything that was wrong with ourselves. So that story was very unusual. And that's probably why the New Yorker picked it up. Oops, I keep skipping ahead. Okay, now for relevance 2, the second kind of censorship is the kind I just talked about when I showed you the titles of all those books. If you don't even publish the books, you refuse to publish them, then you're censoring before they ever get out there and have to be burned. And there are certain topics that it's very hard to get published, and groups in society that aren't used to hearing bad news about themselves. Stanley Ellen, who was a very popular writer, he wrote the very famous, much anthologized story, Specialty of the House. And it was about a very special men's gourmet club. And he could get anything published after that. It was in the New York Times bestseller forever. But when he tried to write one about the hypocrisy in Brooklyn among the publishing people that lived in the middle class people and scholarly people who were, you know, liberal outside he had a character who was very racist inside, but he was all polished and liberal on the outside. Well, he couldn't get that published. So that's what I mean. He did finally, but he had to go to some semi-pornographic small publisher that he knew. But that's what I mean by censorship before it comes out, where certain topics are taboo. Here I go again, hitting that wrong button. Oops. And you cannot get them published. So what we would call that is when your society, and all societies do this, some are more soft-shelled than others, you're creating one hegemonic narrative. And political censorship via omission is often part of that, where you have one coherent narrative, and they may not totally censor everything, but it'll be isolated little atomized stories that are never connected. So people really only hear the one hegemonic narrative. And so that's where the film and the book sort of missed that boat about things that are preemptively censored before they're out. And here's an example from the year 2007. I can't see your hands, but I'd like to see a show of hands how many of you have ever heard of this movie or seen it, even though Meryl Streep was in it and it won awards, and I'll tell you about that. So this movie was censored actually at the time here in the United States. Could you mute yourself, whoever there? Okay. Was censored because it was based on a case where a student from China had murdered his professor. And but within a year, I think there was a case in Virginia Tech where, a big number of people were shot. So that was part of it, but that wasn't the whole reason, because this had already won an award, a very important award. It only got released to 2 or 3 cities, and it made a total of $75,000 at the time of release, and then it was pulled. So this is a film that has that other kind of, they call it suppression, or soft-shelled censoring. And I have a clip here as well that I will show for you. I never know how many times to hit the button because it's trying to open. Okay, here we go.
Looking at the stars.
I'm looking at the dark matter. 99% of the universe, dark matter.
This is the highest score we've ever had on the qualifying exam.
Thank you, Professor Jake.
Welcome to the team.
I would like to propose a toast to our new Chinese students. Ganbei.
Up the bottoms.
Oh, bottoms up.
Are you a student here?
No. Are you?
Yes, cosmology.
Wow. Hey, maybe you could give me a free makeover.
I think so.
This is excellent work, Lieutenant. Now we're cooking with gas.
Thank you. I am a scientist.
You certainly are.
Feel free to challenge me all you want. Just remember, I'm always right.
I think you should focus on this dark matter problem.
Impeccable, Lawrence.
We're all working for Riser here.
It's a highly original piece of work.
It's pure speculation.
I wish there was something you could do because he looks up to you so much.
He's not a team player.
You're a really nice guy, but
Absolutely not.
I don't think it's gonna work out between us.
We can't accept your dissertation until you redo the computation.
Why you never tell this to me?
He's an arrogant little bastard.
I just want to make a connection.
Dark matter.
He's in way over his head.
So I think most people do try to act on the best of their knowledge, what they can ascertain to be the various points that are important in a situation. But then how important is the ability to know? That's what Ray Bradbury is dealing with in Fahrenheit 451. And he contends in that novel that it changes people's very natures when they're given enough. It's not 1984 where people are deprived. It's a very affluent society and they have plenty of entertainment and there are jobs there and they're not unhappy. They're just not allowed to read. And it changes the way that they think. So these are things to keep in mind. And let's see, where is it? Oh, here is that prize that this film that you've never heard of won. It is the Alfred P. Sloan Prize. And often if you watch PBS, Nova and things are also funded by that foundation. And this was a big award for this film, and it depicts the lives of scientists, engineers, or science and technology as a theme. And right now, science is very controversial because of the film Oppenheimer. And so this is something, oops, that we, oh goodness, no, can't do that. All right, so censorship via omission creates no protest. Unlike these noisy book bannings and burnings in the film Fahrenheit 451. And in that way, when it happens behind the scenes, suppression or censorship is all the more effective because you have to know something is missing to be upset about it, and you don't know because it's done behind closed doors. So nobody is aware what they are not able to see or read. There's no great labyrinth of a bunch of contested arguments going on. Everything's all smooth and unanimous. No ripples, but what lies below, dark matter, just as in the film. And I do hope you'll all see the film. Actually, it has 1 million views, by the way, on YouTube. So I'd like to thank all of you for being with me on this journey into the labyrinthine mind of Ray Bradbury. And I hate to talk over this excellent music by Bernard Herrmann. This is also from the film version of Fahrenheit 451. And this is near the end when the people who've memorized books to keep them safe are walking in November and the snow is just beginning to fall. Ray Bradbury said every time he saw the end of his film, he would cry. Didn't matter how many times he'd seen it. And thank Bernard Herrmann for that. And thank you for coming. I do appreciate your interest in Ray Bradbury.
Thank you so much, Gloria.
You're very welcome. I don't know how to get out. Oh, wait, I do know how to get out. There we go. And I'll stop sharing now.
You've given us a lot to think about.
Well, thank you. Oh, I see my friend Sylvia there. She did make it.
The question about what are things that we may not know about is kind of a haunting one. I remember none of us, most of us, had never heard of Tulsa Wall Street until very recently. You know, the history that we are presented in our school books, depending on who edited it, we really don't know what's not there.
That's right.
It's a interesting concept to think about.
That's
I was just going to bring up another thing that was soft. It was interesting that you said about soft censorship and movies. I have a copy of a movie called The Victors that came out in 1964. And you cannot get a copy of that in what do they call it? So that you can see it as District 1 or what is it? DVDs are for different areas. You can get a copy of the Victors in a European or in Southeast Asia, but you can't get a copy in the United States. And I actually, because I'm with IT, I actually converted it so it can be played in the United States. And I was like, why is this being banned? I mean, it has all these people who became really excellent actors and famous. And I think it's banned because one soldier during the Second World War was executed for desertion. And there's a dramatization of that. And the United States doesn't like thinking about that. So I never thought of the concept of soft censorship.
Well, that is the problem, that is considered the more effective way to do it, and it can be done only top down because the people at the bottom don't have the power to do it preemptively. You have to be in control of the publishing house or the film studio. And I see someone, like my husband says, it could have been pulled because of low viewership, but now 1 million people, Bob, have watched it on YouTube. So I don't think that was it. I'm glad I checked on that. It's 1 million people. So I think it was because it is someone else, Elizabeth Neal said, was it because it showed a cultural conflict? Yes, and it also showed how international students are used like serfs, basically, in academic departments where American students will sometimes object, but these students will not because they will get their green cards pulled and have to go back. So it does a wonderful job of x-raying how international grad students sometimes are almost treated like the trafficking slaves. And I just can't say enough about this film because this is a real problem with people from, other countries where they don't have the advantages when they come here to be grad students. I hope that everyone who can has the time will give it a watch because it's right on YouTube and it's free. And I don't know, there may have been some other questions. I'm trying to go back and forth here.
Well, there's a comment about moveon.org. They have a banned book mobile van driving around some of the worst states of censorship. So you can support that if you like. They buy banned books and they give them out, to people free.
Right.
Another comment is wondering what books have been banned in California.
I'm sure you could look that up.
Right.
Just put in California and book bans or banned books and everything is out there these days.
Right. And another comment is about your local library board. If there's an opening, consider running for the board, not letting MAGA people who believe in censorship get on the board.
That's true. And there was a movie, I didn't have a chance to work it into my talk, but it was called Storm Center. Have any of you heard of it? Storm Center. It came out, I believe, in 1957, and Betty Davis plays a librarian. And in that film, it's a book called Explorations About Communism or something. And someone sees the word communism in the title, and it turns into a big, well, I don't want to be a spoiler, but Storm Center is the title of the book.
Right.
At the height of the McCarthy era. So Betty does a wonderful job as this New England librarian in that film.
I thought the comment that the captain made about the only way everyone could be happy is if everyone is equal or the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the effect of those TV screens was kind of like brainwashing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it was amazing how he foresaw the way technology would go, because now we do have TV screens. That was way, you know, science fictional in the film in 1966. We had a big TV screen that took up most of the wall. And then they would get 2 and 3, so they'd be surrounded, you know, like virtual reality.
Right.
And evidently the families would invest in these one wall at a time. And it's just very similar to the way that things actually turned out, but decades later.
I thought it was interesting they referred to the earbuds as wasps and seashells.
Mm-hmm. Well, that and they're in. If you see the film version from 1966, there are things that are modern that are coming in, but because they don't read and they have no sense of history, Francois Truffaut very amusingly brings in things that are old-fashioned and that they think they're discovering them, or it's not clear if they think they're collectibles because they are old, or if they just don't have any memory because they don't know that these things are something that already has been discarded.
Right, that was another.
Go ahead.
By losing your memory, you know, the woman was practically a robot.
Yeah, the wife, Linda, in the film.
They couldn't remember how they met, which was 10 years ago.
Mildred, she was called Mildred in the novel. And I had to wonder, because this novel he was starting writing it. He finished it in 1947. And I think Mildred Pierce came out in 1946. And Mildred Pierce was a woman who was all about things. Most people don't remember that film, but she was all about things, getting money so that her daughter could be given every advantage. So that I think he named her Mildred and was influenced by Joan Crawford and Mildred Pierce. So the Linda character, Julie Christie, is accused of not being able to act, but I think she did a good job of differentiating Clarice. She plays 2 parts: the rebel reading girl who's an intellectual and the comatose, practically non-thinking wife. And I think she does a good job. She didn't overstate the differences, but plays both roles pretty well. And I don't know of any other things that were changed a lot from the novel to the film. Oh, I know one. The Mechanical Hound. Who ever thought in our own lives we would see that we would really have mechanical hounds? And if you get the DVD of the Truffaut film of Fahrenheit 451, there's a bonus feature where Ray Bradbury is being introduced about all the things that went into the making of it. And he's very sad. I wish they hadn't taken out my mechanical hound. I really wanted that mechanical hound in there. And now they actually, General Dynamics company has built mechanical hounds, these walking, you've probably seen the robot walking dog thing that they have. You can go over all terrain, and it's not as lethal as, but I have a feeling they're going to put it to that use. The mechanical hound in Fahrenheit 451 had 8 legs like a spider, and it had injector fingernails, long hypodermic needle fingernails that it could put morphine into people and kill them, giving them a huge overdose or just enough to knock them out. So that would have made it a different kind of a story if you had all those trappings of science fiction. The older one did away with a lot of that, and it's more of a story of the minds and the society. And 2018 they put the mechanical hound in, and they put in all kinds of more what we think of as science fiction tropes, you know, the things like laser guns, that kind of thing. Are there any other questions, or have any of you had experiences watching the film or reading the book that you'd like to share with us? Because it's to me, it was a very wrenching read the first time I read it. No takers.
I've never read Fahrenheit 451.
It's
I
not
sus-
wrong.
No, it's not. I've seen the book many times.
Have it here. Show it to you.
I suspect
Take care of it.
but now I will add it to my TBR list.
Well, I hope so. I hope many of you will also see, both the film version of Fahrenheit 451 and give Dark Matter a try, because I think you'll be amazed at what a good film it is. And people around the world are watching it, and it's sad that it partially I could see why they did it, because of that serial killing at Virginia Tech happened in the year right after or before. It was, I forget the timing, but it wasn't good timing.
I had to read 451. It was required in high school. And I had a general rule not to like any book I had to read in high school. So maybe I should reread it.
I think that might be a good idea, because we all read differently. And at the time, it was a different society, and now we can look back at it from a distance and analyze the social situation as well as the book.
I listened to it on tape, and I listened to it on tape. I got it from the library, checked it out, and it's only 5 hours, a little over 5 hours, and it was interesting to listen to.
It's a lot more grim than the film, the 66 film, because of the wars that are looming, and the fact that the people aren't aware that they're looming, because they've been trained to be so docile and not curious, that they don't even go beyond their daily lottery games or playing videos or whatever people fill their days with. They don't think there's a big picture. We've lost the ability to see a big picture, or think it's so beyond us we can't really think about it. And that's what Ray Bradbury was seeing in that Cold War. He was seeing that people would fill their days with everything but this mushroom cloud.
Reality.
Well, the nuclear risk that was quite prominent.
The one family that actually talked to each other were regarded as suspicious.
Right. Well, I remember that sort of attitude because I was not that old. I came in around 1948, but even then I remember them, people would refer to, what was his name, Adlai Stevenson, as an egghead. And the term of abuse tended to be New York intellectuals. Hi, Joan. Joan Philo, you're one of them. New York intellectuals and eggheads, So if you didn't want to be singled out, you had to prove that you liked golf, or you played the most popular sport or something.
Shoot guns. Shoot guns. I just want to say Adlai Stevenson was from Illinois. So it's I grew up also remember that. And I just want to say he was not a New York intellectual.
No, but
egghead from the Midwest.
Two different groups, two different kinds. The New York intellectuals, they didn't like that wing of the Democratic Party of which he was the poster child. And they also didn't like New York intellectuals because, well, just because. And I remember that, and I was not that old. I was a kid, and I remember hearing the way people talked who were adults. And there was something very suspicious about being different. And you can see that Ray Bradbury was subjected to that because he didn't drive. That's another thing to be in the club. You had to be part of the great American culture of the open road and your automobile. And he didn't like any part of that. So how un-American, he just wanted to walk, and he would take public transportation when it existed in LA, which wasn't too bad then. It was a different LA.
Well, thank you so much. We are about at the hour.
Well, thank you for having me. And I hope everyone got something fun out of this, or interesting or engaging, whatever. I certainly enjoyed it.
I think we certainly did. And everyone's welcome to stay on longer if you like. But I just want to mention that our next program is going to be August 30th, and it's going to focus on teaching civics, why it's important. So we're focusing in on education.